Hey friends, welcome back to another video. Today is Thursday, which is kind of a random day to start a vlog, but you know what? I just am feeling like it, and I think it's because the weather is getting cooler, and so I just have this fresh creativity that is coming to me because of this weather. I am excited for this vlog. I'm basically just gonna do a cozy at home reading vlog with the goal of trying to finish my book. I'm currently reading A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed, and I have been adoring this book. And if you follow my TikTok, you saw with my weekly update on there that this past week was a bit of a hard week, and it just made it a lot more difficult for me to pick my book up. I found myself wanting to watch TV more, and not that that's entirely a bad thing, but I typically just don't watch that much TV, and I do think part of it is the fall time. There's so many good shows and movies to watch in the fall, and I have like a personal watch list specifically to try to watch those things during the season, so I'm giving myself grace in that area. But at the same time, this is week 2 of me reading this book. I have about 70 to 80 pages left of this, and I know I could finish it in a day, but I need to just kind of make myself be determined to do it because I have an idea of what I want to read next, and I would just love to document some reading this weekend. So all that to say, we're just gonna have a cozy at home reading weekend together. We're probably gonna be reading outside a lot. I'm gonna try to finish this book. I'm gonna start a new one. I'm gonna be having a lot of tea and coffee and all of the fun, cozy autumn things. So I'm excited that you're here. If this is your first video of mine, thank you so much for being here. It means the world to me that you clicked on this video. My name is Shelby, and I love to share all the cozy, homey, bookish things with you. It brings me so much joy to share my reading experience on this part of the internet. So thank you for being here. I hope that you'll stick around by liking and subscribing. That way you won't miss a video and you can participate in all of the bookish conversations that I love to have with you on here. So without further ado, we're gonna start this vlog off with me cleaning my house because I have been putting off. I just realized my camera is very slowly, yep, there it goes, okay. The tripod is broken and I need to get a new one, but that will happen eventually. I need to start this video off doing some chores, which is not very fun, but I think that if I do it, it will give me a clearer mind to read this weekend. I have been cleaning my laundry, but I have not been folding it and putting it away, and it is driving me insane. I do not like doing this chore. It's probably my least favorite chore, but I always feel so much better when it's done, so I'm gonna just check it off my list that I don't have to do it anymore, and then we'll get to the more fun things like reading. All right, it's a little bit later. I've cleaned my house and I changed because I worked out in the clothes that I was wearing in the previous clip, but it is 1 o'clock. I have not had a coffee yet, and I really want one, so I'm gonna make a coffee. The coffee beans I've been using lately are so good because someone from my church roasts her own coffee, so it's literally the most fresh coffee ever, and it pulls the best espresso shots. When I first got my espresso machine, I kind of was trying to do it cheaper and just use the coffee beans I had at home, which are fine for like a pour over or a coffee pot or something, but it was not pulling very good espresso. And then I kind of upped my game and I tried this fresh coffee that I found at the grocery store, but even that is just not as good as this one I've been using from my friend at church, and it really makes the biggest difference. So if you have an espresso machine and you're pulling your own shots at home, I definitely recommend getting something like as fresh as you can because it will make all the difference in the world. I am sitting outside to read. I just read a little bit inside. I have like 60 pages left, and I really want to finish this today. And I think that I can do it if I can concentrate. Tonight we're having leftovers for dinner, which means I don't have to cook, which saves me a lot of time. So let's see if I can finish this while I'm laying out here. Hey guys, it's the next day. I finished A Study in Drowning last night, and I absolutely loved this book. I ended up rating this book 5 stars. It was one of those things where it took me a minute to figure out what I wanted to rate it because I was so tired, to be honest with you. And after I sat and I thought about it and I thought about the whole story and I thought about the way that this book made me feel in the experience of reading it, it totally is a 5 star. There were so many moments where I was jaw-dropping because of how beautiful the prose is in this book. There were so many times that I was teary-eyed because of it, and I've talked about this a little bit on my channel, but I read a wide variety of genres, and I think that the reason that I'm able to do that instead of just sticking to one genre in particular is because I have learned what my reading taste is. And my reading taste is that I really enjoy an emotionally deep story. I want there to be character work, and even if you don't like the characters at first, I want to be able to not necessarily relate, but I want to be able to sympathize and empathize with the things that they are going through. A lot of times when I read more contemporary stuff, whether it's a romance or a new fantasy, I just don't get that because it's more about the plot versus about the characters. And so now that I know that my book taste is a character-driven story, it allows me to go find those types of books in any kind of genre. But fantasy has continually been a genre that has been difficult for me to get through, and it's not because I don't think there are good books out there. This is proof that there are good books in the fantasy genre that have that rich character work, but I also just think my personality, it's really difficult for me to get into learning the worlds of fantasy. This book was incredibly atmospheric, and it reminded me a lot of my experience reading Divine Rivals. I loved that book, and I think that what made the reading experience for that book so memorable and kind of easy to get into is because it felt like the real world, except there were some fantasy elements. And so that's why I had such a good time in this world as well, because it was so atmospheric and very fantastical, but it also just felt like the real world, and it wasn't necessarily magic kind of fantasy. It just was like fantastical things that our world doesn't have. And I don't know what it is about that combination, but I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the two main characters of this book. I believed them. I loved the inner dialogue of the female main character specifically. I think her name is Effie or Effie. I just really appreciated how in-depth the author went into her thought process behind what she was going through and what she was thinking, and all of the hard things that she had to work through on a personal level in the middle of this story. This is a beautiful book, and if you are somebody that likes tropes, sometimes I think tropes can ruin a book. I went into this knowing basically nothing about it, and it really made the experience amazing. But if you like to know tropes going in, this is a dark academia book with an enemies to lovers subplot. It is not super heavy on the romance, which I liked. It wasn't the main part of the story. There is a mystery element to this book, and obviously fantasy as far as like different gods and stuff like that. It was very mythical. So I loved this. I highly recommend, and I am so glad I read it in the fall because the vibes of reading this in the fall were impeccable. It was literally perfect. I've got my afternoon cappuccino, and I have a stack of books with me because now I need to pick my next book. And earlier I said that I had an idea of what I wanted to read next, and so I need to figure out if I actually want to. But the book I was thinking of is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is one of the few contemporary romance books that I have read multiple times because of the deep emotional character work that I talked about a minute ago. I have read this last year. I did not read it, but before that I read it 2 Octobers in a row because the book mostly takes place in October. It is a fall romance, then and now timeline taking place like in a cabin, and so I really loved it. You can see all the cute little fall elements on the front of the book, but I'm trying to decide if I want to read this, and if I do, then that means I just need kind of what I call brain fluff. Like, I need something easy to read, and on the other hand, I also am interested in reading historical fiction again because I really love historical fiction. I feel like the majority of my books end up being historical fiction because of the deep character work. I find it most often in historical fiction, and I also love just learning through historical fiction and reading about different time periods and stuff. Books that I have right now that are kind of on my radar is The German Heiress by Anika Scott. I borrowed this from my library. I think in my last vlog I had this in my library haul. This is a historical fiction during World War II, taking place in Germany following a main character who was an heiress. It says it's been nearly 2 years since the war ended and she's left with nothing but a false identification card and a series of burning questions about her family's past. So I don't really know if this is going to be like a war effort story or if it's going to just be like a family story with the backdrop of World War II. I have no idea, but this looked very interesting to me. The thing about historical fiction for me is that if I find the right one, I end up loving it, which means I wish I had owned the book. Because if I read this from my library and I love it, I'm gonna want it on my shelf when I'm done, and I hate doing that. Like, it is so annoying to me to buy a book that I've already read. I don't know why. So I'm kind of iffy on reading this until I get a copy, or at least a used copy, because I just have a feeling that I'm gonna like it. And so I might want to own this. So I probably am not going to do this one for now. My other two options, Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. I don't know how to say her last name, and I've looked it up before and I keep forgetting. So if you know how to say it, let me know. I probably should just Google it. It says winter 1945, 4 refugees, 4 secrets. Each one born of a different homeland, each one hunted and haunted by tragedy, lies, and war. It looks like it's gonna go between different perspectives because each chapter has their name at the beginning. I really enjoyed Between Shades of Grey by this author. It was my first 5-star read of the year, and I think that this might be a good option for me because it's YA, so the words are big. I'm feeling like I need something a little bit easy to read, which is why I was considering Low and Other Words, but this might be a good in-between because it's historical fiction and easy to read. So maybe this is a good option for me, but my final option is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. Now, Kristen Hanna has not been my favorite author in the past. I enjoy The Nightingale. I actually wish that I still had my copy because I would be interested to read it again. It's been a few years. I enjoyed that as a World War II historical fiction. I did not enjoy The Women as much for a lot of reasons, but this is a historical fiction taking place in the 70s in Alaska. The cover gives fall vibes to me, and it might just be a sunset, but the colors just remind me of fall. This has been on my shelf, and I'm not expecting this to be 5 stars, okay? I know so many people love this, but just Kristen Hanna as an author, because she's not my favorite, I don't want to go into it with super high expectations and then be disappointed. So I'm going into this thinking I might like it but not love it. Then if I end up loving it, I will have a happy surprise. So what I'm gonna do is sit and just read a few pages of each of these books and see which one feels most right now. I have been reading outside and I decided to pick up The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. By the way, this has nothing to do with the actual story, but something about a big chunky paperback. I'm just in the mood for that. This is like 500 pages, I think. 545 pages. So it's a pretty big book and I love the cover of it. I am 17 pages in and I am already very invested in the story. With The Women, it's talking about Vietnam, but this one is post-Vietnam, and so I've been wanting to read more historical fiction during that time period. And so if you have any recommendations for the Vietnam War historical fiction, then I would really appreciate your recommendations. So leave a comment if you have recommendations because I want to read more of that. But I'm gonna sit and read this. We're going to my in-laws this evening for dinner and we're gonna just be outside because it's so lovely, so I might get to read some while I'm there. So I'm just gonna sit and read this for a little bit. Hey guys, I need to give you my reminder that I say literally every single video that my husband is probably gonna be heard in the background of this video playing his game. But it's actually a couple of days later, and I have had a somewhat busy weekend, somewhat restful weekend, and I've been reading The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. So I wanted to give you a little update. I'm currently on page 108, and the chapters are sort of long. I've read books that are longer than this, but they're not short chapters either. It is easy to read. I have been scrolling longer than I need to today, so I'm going to turn my devices off and go read outside. I feel like every single day of this video is me going outside with my book, but the weather is so nice, so I am not going to apologize for that. This is following a girl named Lenny. Her father was a prisoner of war in Vietnam and has dealt with PTSD and a lot of other things coming home from being in the war, and she kind of has lived a nomad life with them, kind of moving around at least once a year, never really having one place to call home. Her father inherits a property in Alaska from his friend that he lost in the war. So they moved to this place in Alaska, and I'm currently in the middle of them trying to figure out life in Alaska, and they're in a super remote place. Like, there's no electricity, there's no running water. It's kind of like living Little House on the Prairie world, except it's in the 70s. What I didn't realize was that Kristen Hanna has some personal ties to Alaska, because I think that it said that either some of her family lived there or she knew someone that lived there or something. So I can definitely tell based on how she's writing this book that there's a little bit more of a personal note to this book. I think I've talked about that Kristen Hanna is not usually my favorite as far as their writing goes, but this story is really good, and I am very excited to get back into it today. I'm just really loving the perspective of Lenny, following her. Currently she is a 13-year-old girl, just seeing life through her perspective. I have heard that this is a very tragic story, so I'm kind of bracing myself for when the super terrible things are happening, but right now it's a great story and I'm loving it. So I'm glad I picked this up, and I also think that the cover looks very fall-esque. So I'm gonna go grab my blanket and probably make a coffee. I haven't had a coffee yet today, so let's get a coffee and go read outside. I literally just filmed this entire clip in slow-mo on accident, so this is actually take 2 for me. But I've been reading The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna, and I am now 242 pages in, so I'm very close to the halfway point, which is, I feel like, pretty good because it's a pretty chunky book. The words on the page are not that big, so I feel like I'm reading it pretty quickly, so it doesn't feel as intimidating as like picking up a huge chunker of a book. But I am loving how she's writing this book because you can tell there's a little bit more of a personal note to it. I read a blurb on the back where she has the author's note, and apparently she grew up, at least for a time, in the wilderness of Alaska. So I think you can kind of tell there's a little bit more like personal experience in this, and it feels a little bit more of like an intimate story growing up. And so I don't know if that makes any sense, but compared to some other books I've read by her, I just can tell there's more intentionality with how she's writing this book, and I am really loving it. There's definitely some super heavy topics, so please look up your trigger warnings. But in my opinion, sometimes when it comes to books that have really heavy trigger warnings, it can feel like those things are romanticized, and so far it does not feel like that to me. So that's why I'm okay with continuing to read it because the trigger warnings are really showing how Lenny is having to process growing up and how she knows it's ingrained in her that these things are wrong, and she has this innate moral code basically that every single human being has. And so experiencing these things, it's obviously heartbreaking, but it is really painting a picture for how Lenny is having to grow up, how she's having to process her life, how she is thinking about the future, how she's taking care of herself now. Really just survival is a huge theme of this book so far, not only in her home, unfortunately, and intellectually and emotionally surviving, but also surviving the wilderness of Alaska. And there's a lot of talk on how they're having to take care of themselves, and you know, they don't have running water, they don't have electricity, and all those things that we are so used to in the West. And so anyway, I'm really enjoying this book. I'm so glad I picked it up, and I'm gonna continue reading this today. But I am now drinking some tea and I'm taking it a bit slow. Other than doing some laundry, I'm not doing very much today. I'm gonna listen to my body, and it is telling me to slow down and to rest. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna read more of this book, but I am going to close the video out here. I feel like this is kind of a boring vlog because I was home the whole time, and I feel like every day I updated you and then I just went outside to read, and that is a little bit of my reality right now. And sometimes I have weeks like that where it's a little bit slower, and I'm really grateful for those days, but it's not always super exciting to film. But I still wanted to share it with you and to just share the reality, which is what I really love to do on this channel, is just share the reality of my reading life as a busy person, but also on the weeks and days when I have a little bit more free time. Anyway, all that to say, thank you so much for being here. I would love it if you would like the video, if you would subscribe so that you can be here for future videos. I'll see you next time. Bye, friends.